Okay, who out there has problems seeing their work sometimes as they are welding? Get everything all set up, perfect, ready for a weld, and when you flash up to start, all you see is this. Don't worry, my friend, we will get you sorted out with this one. I got you covered. So typically when I am talking to people who are having this particular problem, a lot of the time people can have problems with their vision, they need glasses and stuff like that. This is all good, it's no problem. We're gonna go over glasses and stuff like that later in this episode, but check out these tips here before we get going first. Okay, take a look at this here. This is what's commonly known as a cheater lens. This is essentially a separate lens that can be mounted inside of a helmet. Traditionally, this kind of is used to like magnify, I guess, whatever you're looking at. I guess the idea with it is to kind of bring the image that you're looking at a little closer to you, or so to speak. Now, what is common is a lot of people who have problems with seeing their work clearly initially think they need to get one of these to try them out. Now, this is a complete personal opinion here, but I find these things a waste of money. Obviously, I'm lucky enough that I have really good vision still, but when I try these things out, they bring everything like really close to me. It's kind of slightly out of focus. My depth perception as I'm looking at something is really thrown off because all of a sudden the image is closer to me, even though my hands are like out here where they normally are. Again, personally, and this is just a personal opinion, I don't recommend using these things. But again, as far as glasses and stuff like that, hang tight. We're gonna go over that later in this episode. That's different. Let's go over some of the most important tips that I give people that help them out a lot right here. And I think that after you consider and make adjustments with the stuff that I'm gonna go over here, considering cheater lens is gonna be kind of a waste of money. Okay, one time I was training a student in person. Essentially, they were working at their own workstation, but they kept coming to me saying that they had a really tough time seeing their work clearly, or their vision was not working, or something like that. I gave them some pointers on how to like position a little bit differently, make some adjustments, and no matter what I suggested, he kept coming back complaining that he was having problems with this. Finally, I said, okay, let's go over to your workstation, I'll give you a hand. And when I looked at his welding helmet, this is what it looked like. Come on, dude, seriously? As far as like things you could take care of to make an improvement, this is the easiest thing that you could do to make any kind of improvement with your gear. I shared this tip on my channel a little while ago. Check this one out here. What we're looking at here is Lemon Pledge Dust Spray. Now again, honestly, and again, personal opinion, I stand by this as being the best stuff you can use to clean your welding lens. What we're gonna do here is we're gonna take the helmet apart completely. Yes, completely, not just the lens on the outside, but we're gonna take the ones out of the inside as well. We're gonna use a clean, soft cloth. Don't use a rag that you found underneath your welding table or whatever. You literally only need a tiny squirt of this stuff. We're not dousing our gear in it, we're not using half the can, just a little squirt is all. What you can do is you can apply this once or twice, but you are gonna find that as you work this into the surface of your lenses, this stuff is gonna fill in any tiny scratches, and if your stuff isn't damaged too bad, this can literally make your stuff look brand new. Like I said, I also do this to the inside of my helmet lenses as well. I have used this stuff for years and I have never had any problems with it. Reassemble all of your stuff, and if you started out with a dirty lens to begin with, I think you're gonna be blown away at how clearly you can see out of it again. Okay, that's the easy stuff out of the way. Now that we can be sure you can clearly see actually through the lenses of your helmet, let's get into the real tips that I give people here. The first thing we're gonna do is reassess your angles. Now here's what is common with a lot of people. They are going to get set up so they are comfortable and they can see perfectly for the start of their pass. But then as they start to travel, the position of their hands is going to change and everything starts to change on the fly. And then after only a matter of a few inches, sometimes they can't see anything really well at all anymore. Now this one gets even more tricky when working with advanced joints where you can't see too clearly, working around pipe or different shapes like that. I think that you're gonna find that the distance that you are comfortable and able to see clearly if you only set up to be comfortable at the start is gonna be very short distances. Now, I talked about this tip a little while ago on my channel, and this is to run dry passes. What I mean by dry passes essentially is just this. You don't even have to have your helmet on or any of your gear. You're just working on actually traveling the motion comfortably as you are getting ready to do an exercise. You want to make sure that however distance you decide to travel, you remain comfortable and can see clearly for the entire duration of the pass. Like we talked about with pipe and more intricate joints like that, this is going to be difficult because the actual shape of the joint is changing as you are traveling. Or like we talked about with some beginners, this is completely fine, but a lot of people are not comfortable traveling that far at all. The main piece of advice I give these people is just break things into smaller passes. There's no problem with this. As a matter of fact, when I first started, I had a welding supervisor who would literally whack me on the hands with a TIG rod when my welding passes were not long enough. Pretty sure that was abuse. But what's the point? Why am I gonna do a weld where only half of it looks good and the other half looks absolutely trash because I'm not comfortable? I tell people it's way better to break things into 2 or 3 passes if each one looks absolutely perfect, instead of just having the first portion of their weld look great and the rest of it look, well, not that good. Having a clear line of sight for everything that we are doing as we are welding is an absolute priority. If you travel a couple of inches and then you get in your own way, you can't see as well as you could at the beginning, this needs to be taken care of. Another really cool tip that I teach my students in my program is actually experiment with where your head is in relation to the welding angle. Sometimes tilting your workpiece towards you a little bit, like this here. Instead of welding across your line of sight, like this example here, tilting it towards you a little bit like this can actually help you to keep yourself in a position where you can see a little bit better as far as a vantage point. Between positioning your head in different angles in relation to your welding pass, as well as possibly breaking the welding passes that you're doing into shorter passes. These are tips that can make a huge difference with somebody's ability to remain comfortable and see clearly if they take the time to address this stuff. Now, the next tip that we're gonna go over here is something that definitely helps a lot of people out. Simply because, honestly, they don't think to do this for themselves. It may seem simple, but check this out. Let's say we've been over everything that we have so far in this episode here. Our helmet is clean with crystal clear lenses. We are positioned in a way that allow us to see better around our hands and have comfortable travel. But there's something that not a lot of people consider, and this is, how high are you? I didn't mean like that, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, like, how high are you actually looking at things on your table? I see people set up at their workbench like this sometimes. Trying to weld far away like this and not being able to see, not only do we have to consider the angles from this direction here that we already talked about, but now we have to consider these angles as well. You see how now we have multiple angles that we have to take into consideration? When you're traveling across a welding pass, this is a lot to compensate for. Let's simplify things. We're going to reassess our overall posture or the position of your workpiece. If I'm standing at a table like this and I have a major angle that I have to deal with as far as being able to see clearly, like we talked about, combined with the other angles that we have to consider earlier, I'm going to be making this way more difficult than it actually needs to be. Watch this tip right here. Sitting down like this seems simple, but sometimes this is way more comfortable for a lot of people, especially with some specific joints. What's this? This one's crazy. Watch this. I'm elevating my work area so I can actually bring this up a little bit closer to myself. This is completely fine. Or better yet, a combination of both. What we have done here is just eliminated these angles drastically. We are much more in line with our workpiece. Positioning ourselves a little bit closer in a lot of these cases might be way more comfortable. I think that as you find, you make adjustments for whatever works best for you, as far as you may be super tall, you may be super short. But I think you're gonna find that your hands, your wrists are gonna become way less tired, way less fatigued. You won't get as sore as much. But most of all, boom, we can see way better. You can also position this on your table however you need. You don't have to be scrunched up super close. You can remain comfortable like this here. So like we talked about, we have a helmet with crystal clear vision. Our angles have been carefully considered. We are now ready to go. And we are now more comfortably positioned and ready to go as far as good posture. At this point, the last thing I'm going to consider to recommend to somebody is think about what welding shade is going to work best for you. You can experiment with this as well. For TIG welding stainless steel, I typically find about a shade 9 or a shade 10 is perfect for me. And for aluminum, I typically use a shade 11 or a shade 12. Again, this is personal preference, but just make sure whatever shade you are using, when you finish a weld, you should not get up and have blind spots in your eyes to deal with. That should not happen. If this happens, just darken your shade a little bit. Okay, like we talked about, let's address people that have glasses or need help with stuff like that. If you're somebody who needs a little bit of assistance with being able to see clearly, it's all good. Here's what I recommend to my students. As far as whatever glasses you may need, just use whatever is comfortable. Typically I say like whatever somebody would use to read a book or something like that relatively close to them. You're gonna position yourself and take everything into consideration that we just talked about. All that stuff is very important to do first. And like I talked about, use whatever glasses that you can usually see comfortable from approximately this distance. Just use this stuff and the tips that we've been over so far, nothing more. And another thing that might actually help out is dimming the lights that are actually behind you if you can. I definitely find that if you can darken up the inside of your helmet, whether turning lights off or whatever, using a hoodie or something like that, light will mess with you a lot less. You'll be able to see through the lens a lot more clearly. Essentially what we're gonna do is we're gonna use whatever we can so we can see perfectly without using a helmet. We're not doing welding without a helmet, chill out. Essentially what I'm saying is if you use glasses, just start out with glasses so we can figure out how you can best see as you are traveling and take care of all the tips like angles and dry runs and stuff like that that we already went over. Sitting at your table like this, you should be able to see everything clearly doing dry run practices. If you can see fine with this situation here where you are just looking at things in front of you, then by the time we add the helmet to the mix, theoretically you should be able to see everything just as well. I almost guarantee that if you take absolutely everything into consideration that I've been over in this episode here so far, using extra gear, extra stuff inside your helmet, like extra cheater lenses or whatever, is just not really going to make that much of a difference in actually helping you to see better. I usually find that the cheater lens just bring whatever bad technique or whatever is blocking you, or perhaps a dirty helmet, just closer to your face. Make sure you are good to go before you do any welding at all. Then like we talked about, we know we are good and covered at square one before even getting started. Now, manipulating your torch is also extremely important, seriously. Whether you are working with aluminum or stainless steel TIG welding, manipulating the torch and good torch techniques should be #1 priority. Check this episode here. This is essentially a free class that I teach as far as different torch techniques that I teach to all my students. If you have not seen that episode yet, go check it out. And do a random act of kindness for a stranger today. My name is Dusty James. Fill and chill. We will talk soon. Peace.